Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
This week at Safeway, shop the 10 for $10 produce sale. With the 10 for $10 produce sale, get items like large avocados, mangoes, green, red, orange, or yellow bell peppers, cucumbers, large lemons, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby-peeled carrots for the member price of just $1 each. Plus, select meats like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef and Signature Select extra meaty pork loin back ribs are buy one, get one free this week. Hurry in before these deals are gone. Visit Safeway.com for more deals.
Did you know you can advertise on podcasts?
Don't act like you're not impressed.
Find out more at podvertise.com.au. That's podvertise with an s.com.au. Ozcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Nest. It's off-season time, but a busy time. Brownlow night and Best and Fairest night. The John Worsfold medal has been held by the West Coast Eagles, so it's great to have a special guest with us today, Drew Jones, to wrap all that up and just pick out a few things that might be interesting for Eagles fans.
Hello, Garby. Yeah, great to be back on The Nest again. And our special guest is Callum Chambers, former West Coast and Carlton player. Callum, thanks very much for your time on The Nest.
No problems at all. Real pleasure.
So pick 13 in the 1997 draft from Lucknow, Victoria. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. 54 games, 38 goals for the Eagles before you moved across to Carlton, but you've migrated back to the West. Does a boy from Lucknow, Victoria just enjoy life in the West a bit better than a country town in Vic, hey Callum?
Yeah, pretty much. Look, nothing against my country town because I do love it, and big credit to you. You did get that pronunciation right, so most people get that one wrong. But yeah, look, it seems like such a long time ago, and I think, not that I was counting, but I think I ticked over, I think last year I've lived more of my life in WA now than I have in Victoria. So yeah, look, when you family back home, of course, that's always a draw, but building my own family here and amongst mates that I've sort of gathered from my time at West Coast and you know, in other walks of life over here was too big a draw card to not come back to. So, mate, I love it here. It's 25 degrees at the moment, looking out at the sunshine. Couldn't be better.
Who are the mates that you've kept from your West Coast days? Callum, who do you keep in touch with?
So, Chad Morrison, I mean, we had a sort of a group of guys that sort of knocked around a bit. Chad Morrison, Michael Braun, Big Coxie, Casey Green, those sorts of guys. And they're generally the guys I still have a bit of contact with. Of course, not so much Coxie now, he's on your side of the country. But the guy, I mean, Brawny and probably Chatty Morrison and Casey Green are the guys I would see more than anyone, really. Chatty lives up not far from me, so I see him a little bit as well. I suppose as time goes on and you start having kids and things like that, it's hard to really keep a constant connection. But yeah, certainly I really value the friendships that I was able to make throughout that time.
So anyone who follows you on Twitter, and I'm sure plenty of Eagles fans do, Kite Standing is the Twitter nickname. That's in connection to Dirt Cat, of course. You're a big Liverpool fan, Callum, which we'll speak about at some stage during the pod, no doubt. But anyone will know that you're a big Eagles fan and you're heavily connected with the club. You love commenting on the club, which is great to see. Who was your team growing up then, and is there any sort of love to whichever team that may have been?
I was a Hawthorn supporter growing up. Played my first game against them and have pretty much hated them ever since, to be honest.
Brilliant.
You know, it's sort of a thing where, I don't know, you realise that these guys are all just normal people and you cop a bit of stick out on the field being a first gamer, and all of a sudden that just is stuck in my mind. And, of course, everyone hates someone that wins all the time, and as they did for quite a while. So, yeah, I think I remember watching the 86 grand final as a 7-year-old or nearly 7-year-old, and everyone hated the brown and gold colours, but they won. And as you do when you're a little kid, you follow the winners, and that was it for me. So, but yeah, that changed pretty quickly once I got over here.
Good stuff. Well, speaking of winning, Nick Naitanui did that last night, boys, taking out the John Worsfold medal, the Eagles' best and fairest, for the very first time, Big Nick, which is a great story after a wonderful season. I don't know what the umpires are watching when it comes to a game, because how he only picks up 3 Brownlow votes is beyond me. He's the most noticeable player in the AFL, for goodness sakes. He had a wonderful season, wins our BNF and can only get 3 Brownlow votes. But well done, Nick Naitanui. It's a great story, and you can see the photo when he's holding up his medal. He's just beaming in a different way. I think he was, Callum, just so happy and so proud of what he was able to put together this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he clearly is probably the most loved guy in Perth. You don't have to be a footy fan to know everything there is to know about Nick Naitanui. But I think for him, probably the pride that he's had in being able to overcome some pretty serious injuries, some pretty serious criticism from across the country. The thing I can say about Nick Naitanui, aside from how wonderful a fella he is that thank Christ we've got him and they don't. I just think he's I think he was rated the 7th most impactful player in the comp this year. I think that's probably selling him a little bit short. All the people seem to do is they play their, fantasy football and super coach and all that sort of stuff, and they see that he averages less than a mark a game and he doesn't average enough possessions and all that sort of rubbish. It doesn't matter. All you got to do is watch a game of footy and see the opposite direction that the players that he's playing against run when he's in the general direction. He's the people that value him the most are his supporters over here at our club. And I suppose putting my supporter cap on now, as I said, who cares about the rest? We know what we've got in Nick. Both as a character off the field, but the impact that he has on it. And it was just fantastic. And I think he's had an interesting few years losing his mum, who he was close to. I'm sure he was probably thinking about her at the same time, and all the hard work that everyone's put into him to be able to repay everyone was fantastic.
I'm glad you said that, because one thing I've said to Garby before, and I say it to people over here in Victoria, because let's face it, West Australians need to stick up for their teams over here, is that there's never almost ever been a player in the AFL where people focus on what Nick doesn't do so much. That's all people ever seem to want to talk about, yet he has these elite skills, some of the best tap work that we've ever seen, certainly in the modern era. And he was tremendous this year. And, yeah, I think people underestimate his mental strength, and it's not talked about enough to bounce back from a couple of ACLs when, the spring in your jump as a ruckman is almost your most important attribute, and it was early days, and he's had to reshape and remake the way he does it. So, yeah, congratulations to Nick Naitanui. Superb season, and I'm hopeful that he's had now this amazing season, All-Australian. The umpires are now aware that he's one of the most impactful players in the competition, and maybe next year he starts to get the votes to make up for it. But yeah, it's criminal, really, how much they underrated his season.
The only excuse I can give them, the umpires, for not noticing is that perhaps when they're bouncing the ball or running away from a contest, he's so quick to win the tap out that by the time they've actually got their heads up or started to gather their thoughts and senses of what they're meant to do, he's already cleared the ball and they haven't actually seen it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that half the time he roves his own taps as well. The ones that he misses when it doesn't land on Luke Shuey or Elliot Yeo's chest, he usually roves it himself. So, look, I don't know. I think, with regards to the Brownlow, of course, it's the most prestigious award in the AFL from an individual's point of view. But I honestly think if you asked every player in the AFL whether they'd rather win the Brownlow medal or the AFLPA's MVP, which is voted on by their peers, I think you'll find a very different result. I haven't seen the results, and I don't, to be completely honest. I'm not even sure if they've voted on that yet, but I dare say the story for Nick Naitanui in that vote would be very different to what you'd see in the Brownlow medal.
Think Champion Data rated Nick Naitanui as the second most impactful player overall in the season, and from, I think, round 8 onwards, he was the most impactful. So I think it was him and Christian Petrarca. So depends on how you measure it, but certainly there's people out there who do believe in Nick Nat. It's not just us. Champion Data, I think they're on board. Before
we go through the rest of the best and fairest, Callum, on the subject of the Brownlow, how many votes did you collect in your career? Do you remember every one of them?
You've been reading I think it's on my profile on Twitter, Polar of 0 Brownlow.
0? I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. I think it's husband of one, father of three, and poller of zero Brownlow votes. Not something that I'd be proud of, but there was probably only, to be honest, I reckon there was one or two games where, not that you like to think about this stuff, but you come off going, oh, I've played all right today. You know, you never know. I might sneak in for one. There was one particular game where I think I kicked three and had a fair few touches, and I thought I was a chance, but David Wirrapunda bobbed up and kicked five, and Cuzzy probably got his usual votes and, yeah, pushed me out. But I don't think I was ever a chance of troubling the scorers on that front.
Brilliant. It's hard to get a vote. Brad Shepherd came third in the best and fairest and didn't get one as well, which is hard to fathom. So Gaff second. Andrew Gaff, how's this, boys? His 8th top 5 finish in the Eagles' best and fairest. He has serious claims as perhaps the most consistent player the Eagles have had in a long, long time. 8 top 5 finishes in the BNF. Incredibly durable, but just a consistent performer. And then Shepherd 3. Barrass and Duggan 4 and 5. I guess they were maybe the surprise packets. Perhaps Tom Barrass, top of the pile in that sense. Then Ryan, Tim Kelly 6. Maybe that's a bit disappointing. Darling 7. Kennedy, and then Shannon Hearn. So what do we make of that in particular, I guess, from the positive side of things, Tom Barrass and Liam Duggan finishing in the top 5?
Yeah, well, Liam Duggan, I think he's one of my favourite players to watch. I think he's got his captaincy material. I think Liam Duggan. He's hard at the ball. He's a bit of a mix of a neat footballer but rugged at the same time. Maybe that's just the hairdo he's carrying at the moment. But I MC a function room at West Coast home games here each week, and I reckon I talk about him every week when I get up there. Him, Tommy Cole, and Jackson Nelson, those sort of youngish, or sort of young to middle-aged sort of guys that have really had cracking years this year. And I think when they're up and going, generally the side's playing a lot better footy, certainly in the back line. But Liam Duggan, I think absolutely well-deserved to be in the top 5. That's not a surprise to me at all.
Yeah, I think he's going to become one of our most loved players on the Nest. Just a shout-out for Tom Barrass. I think after the troubles that he had towards the back end of last year, fell out of form at the end of the season, for him to acknowledge it in the off-season, go away and come back, and get that confidence back and become a really elite key defender in the competition. I think that's a really good story. Like, maybe it's a little bit overlooked in terms of the West Coast narrative for the season, but him up and going at his best was a really key part of the 2018 premiership and is going to be a massive part of our backline going forward. So that was good to see him poll well and have a good year.
No doubt. Josh Rotham, best emerging player, another one of those halfbacks. Callum, it feels like we've got 42 halfbacks on the Eagles list and all of them seem to do a job, but he was another one to come through this season. Brad Shepherd, best clubman, the Chris Manwaring Award. Well done to him. Tim Kelly 7th, though. If I'd said to you at the start of the season, Callum, that Tim Kelly would finish 7th in the Eagles' best and fairest, would you be slightly disappointed?
I think so. I mean, based on his form over the last couple of years at Geelong, and, I was really surprised at how quickly he hit the ground running over there. And, of course, you think if you can slot him into a midfield that of the capabilities that we already had, that he'd just take off. And obviously with Nick, feeding him. But, look, if you had said that at the start of the year, not knowing what was about to unfold in 2020, then, yeah, you probably would have thought that he might have finished higher. But, look, he had some stuff. Obviously the big issue with him over the last couple of years has been his family and the family life and wanting to be close to them. Far be it from me to talk about what other people are doing with their families. I think that first, and clearly I'm saying this from the outside looking in, but I sort of feel like that first little bubble up there, everyone was trying to get used to the new situation, but Tim also had his family and his kids up there to be with as well, which can, I guess, in a lot of ways can be a comfort, but in a lot of other ways, when everyone else is doing something different, might have been I don't want to say a distraction because your family's never a distraction, but, I just think it took him a little while to hit the ground running. And then obviously when he got back home here to WA, and he had a really good patch of form midway through, the season here at Optus Stadium. And then I think he carried that on a bit towards the end. So, look, I think, he might be from WA, but sometimes it can still take a bit of time to get used to being back home and being amongst family and friends and things like that. So, look, I'm really glad we've got Tim, and I'm sure there's probably a small part of him that wishes he was wearing blue and white hoops this weekend. But we're glad we've got him, and I think there's plenty more to come from him.
Yeah, I think 6th or 7th would be slightly disappointing, but only going by his previous standards. And I think I've said to Garby already on the Nest, I think there's no way that he doesn't have a better year next year with everything settled, especially with family life and going back to playing regular games in Perth. So as you said, Callum, he was sensational through the middle of the season. That's when we saw the best of Tim Kelly, when knowing that he's going to have more stability playing at home and then the extra chemistry that he gets, from getting to know his teammates, that's going to make a massive difference for him. And then what I really loved is that his best performance of the season was against St Kilda when we were really undermanned, chips were down, and he found a way to summon the energy to put in, a 3-vote performance in the Brownlow, but also, inspirational in the last quarter to get us over the line. So that gives me a lot of hope that, he was able to stand up when we really needed him as well.
Hopefully he'll be better for the run of the first season. It was a tumultuous one, of course, and it might just take him a year to settle in. I'd like to see him move to half forward a little bit more, Callum, rather than just being on the ball all the time, because we saw how many goals he kicked at the Cats. He's going to cop tags, especially after the role Greenwood played on him in the final. I'd like to see Simo just give him a bit of a spell at half forward, give him a bit more space to run into perhaps, and just change up his game a little bit, and that might just mix up the dynamic, which can perhaps help him impact games in another way.
Yeah, I agree with that, absolutely. And I think in a normal season, you probably would have seen that a little bit more. But, with injuries to Luke Shuey and Yowie as well throughout the season, that probably made it a bit more difficult to spend more time outside of that centre square. But, towards the end of the season, we saw Liam Duggan move into the middle every now and then, and certainly held his own in there. And he mentioned it again, I think it must have been on the red carpet at the Best and Fairest last night. But an interview I saw where he mentioned enjoying that midfield role that he had. So I think, with everyone fit and firing, you probably would see that a little bit more, because he's shown that he can be dangerous around goals. And, I completely agree with that. Absolutely.
Beautiful. All right, let's get into your life and times, Callum Chambers. We'll start with feathering the nest, and we'll get you to rip through a few of the questions we asked to all of our guests. First and foremost, your favourite Eagles player, someone you played with, someone you watched, whoever it may be.
Well, I wasn't sure. I wrote down two. I wrote them on a bit of notepad here. My favourite current player, I just love Brad Shepherd. I love that I'm a bit biased because his mum and dad are in my room at the club every week, so I've gotten to know them quite well. But I love the fact that he started out, and I remember this clearly watching him play as a sort of winger half forward, and I know this is going to sound stupid, but he reminded me of myself when he first started. He was a skinny kid that didn't quite look that he was sure of himself. But then all of a sudden there was a switch flicked somewhere. He moved to half back, and I honestly think he's been the best sort of small to medium half back over the last 5 years in the AFL. So I think he should be a 3-time All-Australian, to be honest. So he's my favourite player. But I love, as far as all-time, Dean Kemp, I can't go past him. He both the silkiness on field, but some of the stuff off field as well. The character that he was just fantastic. He was our fines master for a while, and that made for some pretty funny times.
All right, Callum, what about your favourite other player who may not have got the headlines, but you loved playing with or watching?
I wrote down a guy that actually plays for the Dockers. My favourite player to watch in the AFL, and has been for a while, is David Mundy. I just, in terms of your superstars of the game, he doesn't, when you talk superstars, you don't talk about David Mundy unless you're talking about someone that knows what they're on about, and he just has got the job done for well over 300 games. I can't remember too many bad ones he's played, and he's still doing it at 36. Garby made reference to my Dirk Kuyt Liverpool connection with the Twitter handle. I loved him because he was an underdog that just kept getting the job done, and that's the same reason I love Dave Mundy.
So I'm going to take the blame here. I think you've misunderstood the question and thought it was a player outside of the Eagles. Favourite other player is actually an underrated Eagles player. So someone who's not a star, but someone from the Eagles that didn't get the headlines like you just outlined, but is still an Eagle.
Oh, well, that's easy. That's every day of the week. That's Rowan Jones. Every day of the week. I've never seen a bloke. I've nearly walked out as a supporter of a couple of Eagles games based on the abuse that he would cop in certain sections of the crowd. And I just, I'd end up, I don't like the confrontation myself, but ask any player that played with him, and particularly that midfield, who they love going into battle with, and it was Rowan Jones every day of the week.
Yeah, basically the question was formed because of the existence of Rowan Jones. Like he epitomises exactly what we...
Once I worked out what the question was, then I realised where that might have been heading.
Brilliant. Your favourite goal? You kicked a fair few from the wing, 38 in total. Which is the one that plays over in your mind more than any other?
Yeah, I had to have a think about this morning because I don't know that there was any that were too spectacular. There were no goal of the year contenders, but I kicked one against Adelaide one day. Remember Juddy getting the ball off half back, and for whatever reason, probably because they didn't think I could play, I was in the centre circle with no one around me, a couple of bounces, and sold a pup. I think it was around, Tyson Edwards, and kicked one from about 55 and was pretty happy with that one. In fact, I've got a photo of the celebration that someone got for me too. So, you take any of that sort of stuff when you can get it. And, that was probably the one that springs to mind.
So, Candy to Tyson Edwards, that's fine. He was a jet, 300 games, I reckon.
Look, I think it was him. If it wasn't, I'm just going to go with that anyway. But,
What about a weird moment from your Eagles career, which just, for whatever reason, it just sits with you?
I found this one a bit hard to think of anything on field. About the only strange thing I can think on field, and I didn't play the game, but I was in the stand, was Bluey McKenna calling for a head count. That was
that's been mentioned a few times.
That was a really strange moment in time. But certainly off the field, there was a few. I remember kicking a ball. Actually, this was during the game. I remember kicking a ball. It was a wet night at Subi Oval, and picked the ball up on the boundary line to kick it as long as I could. And I reckon Coxie would have only been a couple of metres away, and Coxie's got a decent sized nose on him, and it hit him flush in the nose. And I don't think I'll ever forget the noise that it made when it hit him in the face. I thought I'd broken his nose in about 15 bits, but it's funny. The things I remember most fondly all happened probably off the field, really, to be honest. Some of the shenanigans around the club and were just fantastic. Garby and Drew, you might remember a bloke by the name of Zach Beck.
Yes, East Perth ruckman.
Angry man.
He possibly played one game of AFL footy, but he was injured a lot. And I remember the day he had to do a beep test, and he had to do it by himself because he was unfit and had to do an extra one. And they got us all into this change room there, big change room. All the lights get switched off. There's blokes flashing torches around. Eye of the Tigers playing. And up the far end comes Zach Beck through the door wearing a hoodie with a full Rocky Balboa thing before he ran about a level 9 in a beep test or something like that. It was ridiculous. But, certainly plenty of good times. But I'd say Bluey would have to top the poll. Most of the stuff Bluey did was strange, to be honest.
Brilliant. Biggest spray, be it from a coach or another player?
Yeah, I used to cop them probably weekly from Ken Judge. I remember a Western Derby in 2001. I think it was my first game for the season, and there was a ground ball in between myself and Troy Cook. Cookie got there first, and I sort of attempted to tackle him and got bowled over. And I remember him telling me that if I ever did something like that again, I'd never play for the club again. But he did that at half-time. I don't know that I've ever had someone scream louder at me in my life. There's spit flying everywhere, and the players are all sort of, what the hell was going on in there? I used to cop him from Judgy a bit. He didn't think, I'm happy to say this now because I know that I was never the toughest bloke getting around, but he didn't think I was hard enough at the ball. And I used to think to myself, well, you played 100 games of AFL footy, mate. So, maybe there's hope for us all. But yeah, I copped plenty from Judgy. And the funny thing was, he was a player I really liked when I was really young because he was a Hawthorn premiership player. So, yeah, there you go. I won't say too much more about Judgy.
Unfortunate the way that happened then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bluey was talking about this last week. He was saying training sometimes on game day and getting back from interstate games and being forced to do gym sessions late into the night. Do you remember that sort of stuff from Judgy?
Yeah, there was some pretty out there, he was a very old school coach in that regard. Like, most coaches, and particularly now in this day and age, they'll take a lot of their advice from the sports scientists and the physios, how often you're allowed to train, how many minutes guys are allowed to train. I remember he used to do things. One training session, he thought it was going to be wet, so we all lined up, and there's about 30 showers side by side in the change rooms. In full kit, we had to stand under each shower for 10 seconds and then go out and train sopping wet. It was just some strange things like that. I get the idea behind it, but the whole thing about me and my style of play, after that happened, he used to get me after training, and he'd get Peter German on the padded bag, and he'd throw the ball over my head, and I had to back and take the mark with Germo running through me from behind. It was ridiculous. I look back now and go, the only thing that ever did for me was give me whiplash. It was just the most insane thing looking back on it, but there was certainly some odd training decisions that he used to make.
So did you resent him when you played?
Yeah, a little bit, to be honest. I just felt like, I knew that I got a lot of games of footy under him. Well, when I say a lot, in a couple of seasons I played 20 games of footy under him. He gave him my first game, so I'll always be thankful for that. But at the same time, sorry, my car's beeping here. At the same time, I just felt like there were so many better ways that he could have gone about, his man management. The good ones at that, and John Worsfold's a ripper. He knows which guys can cop a spray and which guys need a bit more of a cuddle and all that sort of stuff. I was probably somewhere in between. I didn't mind getting the odd spray, provided it was fair and that it was, constructive. But it was more so that I think a lot of his stuff wasn't that constructive. So I resent's a pretty strong word, but I wouldn't be far off it.
Well, before Ken Judge was Mick Malthouse, Callum. 1997, You're drafted to the Eagles, pick 13. What are your memories of that moment and moving across from a country town to WA under Mick Malthouse and part of this successful Eagles team that was fading but still had superstars aplenty amongst them?
Yeah, it was fantastic. I won't lie and say that coming from a small town in, far east, eastern Victoria, was West Coast weren't my first choice from a location point of view, but when the name got called out, and it got called out probably 40 or 50 picks earlier than I honestly thought it would. It got called out and very quickly, because Jackson Crabb was the pick directly before me. So they did two very quickly in succession. So I didn't really have time to think about it. But out into the backyard with a few mates, and I was playing cricket, and I remember my mum coming out and saying, I think I was batting at the time, which was odd for me. I didn't last long as a batsman, but mum comes out and goes, you got a phone call, you need to come in. And I'm like, I'll be in a minute. She says, you better hurry up. It's Mick Malthouse. And so, it was only a very brief phone call just to say welcome to the club and all that sort of stuff. And he told me, and I'll sound like a peanut saying this, I'm only saying it because he said this to me, but he said, I see you in the Dean Kemp mould. And about the only thing I had in common with Tommy Kemp was being skinny. That was about it. But I remember him saying that clearly, and I remember hanging up and I couldn't wait to get over. I was homesick for a little while, but I couldn't wait to get over. And like you say, there were so many stars and premiership players still at the club. I was very much intimidated by Mick. He was very hard, but he always showed such care for his players. Even years after he left West Coast, he bumped into mum and dad on the street in Melbourne, and he knew who they were and asked how things were going for me. And for that sort of thing, and the way that he made mum and dad feel about me being over here, I think they're the sort of things that, when Mick Malthouse cops a bit of a serve from people around the footy industry for his coaching and this and that, they don't know these other sides of Mick Malthouse. And I just absolutely loved my time with him, and I wish I could have had more.
Who took you under their wing, Cal, when you came to the club?
The guy that I reckon, and even up to this day, he's always a guy when we're at functions, would come up and always ask how things were going, ask how the family's going, was Chris Lewis.
Wow.
I remember a day, and tell me to shut up if you need to, because I know I talk a lot, but
no, you're going beautiful.
I remember a day in my first year or two playing a practice match over at Waverley. I think we played Richmond, and we went to the Esplanade Hotel in Melbourne for lunch the following day before going to the airport. Now, growing up as a Hawthorn supporter, everyone in Victoria hated the sight of Chris Lewis. They just, he was just such an antagonistic player. And, of course, then he had the biting charge on Todd Viney and a few other bits and pieces always getting reported. And I remember sitting there having lunch this day, and all the players were on one side of the bistro where we were, and Mum and Dad were coming down, had come down to see me, so I sat in a booth with them by myself on the other side of the restaurant. And Louis came up and asked if it was all right to sit with us, and he sat and had lunch with Mum and Dad, and he told them that that we were going to look after him, and that he was going, talking about me, of course. He's going well and this and that. And from that day forward, our family have loved him. And every time we see him, always ask how Mum and Dad were going and all that sort of stuff. Not the player that would, I guess, in terms of where he played, he wasn't the guy to help me. That was probably still Dean Kemp, because I always went to him for advice. But, yeah, those two guys were the ones that I reckon really helped me the most.
Fantastic. So you've spoken about coming into the club under Mick and then the Ken Judge years in detail, which we thank you for. And then Ken Judge departs and Woosha comes in, and it looks as if it's the time for you to really take charge at the Eagles and make a position your own. And as the club's starting to get better, you seemingly are going to go with them. But a couple of youngsters by the name of Kerr and Judd come onto the scene, which probably makes it a little bit tougher for you to stay in the team, and it becomes a bit of a challenge. What was that like when these two dynamos come in as you're ready to sort of explode as an Eagle?
Well, it's funny. I still hold the record as the only player to ever be picked in a team ahead of Chris Judd. And now that he's retired, I'll keep that mantle. But round 1, 2002, and I remember Woosha's first year, he came in, he said, I don't care about names. I don't care about, something to this effect. If you play well during the pre-season, you'll get to play. And I'd had a good pre-season. I think it was the Wizard Cup at the time. And so I got the nod in round 1. And, of course, history knows Juddy went and kicked 5 for East Perth the next day. But I guess the thing for me is about confidence. And Woosha just gave me confidence to know that if you've got the ball, tuck it under your arm, have a shot for goal. You've always, this is not just me, but everyone, you've always being able to do all these things. All the players are skillful, use them, and don't get too bogged down in team rules and things like that. And that's, I think, why in that first year that I had what I consider a good year, and I was able to play most games and kick a few goals and all that sort of stuff. But then all of a sudden, as you say, those two guys come in. Embers decides to become a wingman. Michael Braun was playing on the wing as well. And then these two guys are legends of the club. So I probably got pigeonholed as a wingman only, and found myself obviously out of the side a lot more often than not over the next couple of years. But, I guess that first year, it certainly became a bit more obvious that, hey, let's, team rules actually are important. Let's not forget about them altogether. And I just didn't quite fit into the structure of the way things were happening, and there just wasn't a spot for me. So I politely asked at the end of 2004 if I could be traded, and thankfully the club sent me where I had wanted to go.
So in Woosha's first year, we played finals. We played Essendon in that first final. I just noticed looking through the record today that you'd played most of the games that season, but you didn't play against the Bombers. So was that form-related or injury?
Yeah, no, that was form. I'd love to say it was injury-wise, but the last probably 3 or 4 games, I broke my hand in about, it was against the Dockers. It was about round 13 or 14 or something like that, and I played with it, and not to use that as an excuse, but I started to lose a bit of confidence, and I wasn't getting as much of the ball, and not doing the job that, Woosha had specifically wanted me to do each week. And really, I got dropped in about round 20, but got put back in, I think, because it was a wet day or something like that, and they dropped Coxie, which sounds a bit ridiculous now looking at it. But, but I knew it was coming. I was lucky to last until round 22, to be honest, and they put Kane Munro in instead, and Munner's kicked 3 in the final and played well. So I guess, justified call. It'd be easy to sit there and be pissed off and all that sort of stuff, but at the end of the day, I saw it coming, and it was probably the right call in the end.
Fair play to you for that sort of perspective. Can I ask about the Juddy battle? Because in his book, he speaks about you quite a bit. When he talks about coming to the Eagles, he says Callum Chambers was the wingman, and I wanted his spot, and that was my target. All pre-season, I just set myself to beat him so I could be the number 1 wingman, which is a pretty crazy thing for a 17-year-old to say, but he's he's Chris Judd. He's one of the all-time greats. That's how he worked. Did you notice that about him, and what did you make of him at the same time?
Oh, no, not at all. I wouldn't. When I picked up his book, and I bought his book to read it, and got to the bit where he started talking about me, which I was quite surprised. I didn't expect to be mentioned at all in his book, let alone talking about some sort of battle that I didn't know existed. And look, you usually find in all when people are motivated like Juddy is, it's across the board, whether it's schoolwork, whether it's his work now, whether it's footy or whatever, just so single-minded about what he wants. And I think that was one of my biggest downfalls. I was happy to go along with whatever came my way, and you certainly look back with a few regrets. But when you look at certain people in life, and be it a Chris Judd or a Ben Cousins or even a Michael Braun, who was probably the hardest trainer at the club, you realise that whatever they do in life, and sometimes it's not a great thing for some of the exploits of these some players, but they do things at full bore. And Juddy obviously had seen from a fitness point of view that I, for a number of years, was probably the benchmark from a fitness point of view at West Coast. And not that I would have ever said it, but I think he wrote in his book that he thought that I was one of the better kicks at West Coast as well, which was something that I suppose he had to work on throughout his career. I think he was an adequate kick, but he just had that mindset. And to be honest, he obviously did it in silence, because I never knew about any battle that we were having. About the only battle I'd ever saw Chris Judd have was singing Australian hip-hop or whatever. So been to a couple of parties where he'd break out the karaoke with his hip-hop. Probably not a sight that most people around Australia would see. So,
What was he singing? What was he rolling with?
Oh, hip-hop is not my thing, Drew. I wouldn't have a clue, mate. But yeah, I'm a bit more of a Billy Joel, Elton John sort of man. Yeah, I've got to be honest. I remember this particular night clearly. It was at Jeremy Hum's house, and this music came on, and he was doing this like a rap battle with no music, and he was just singing and making these, a bit like 8 Mile sort of thing. It was hilarious. Almost as funny as him trying to do gymnastics, which gave the boys a good laugh as well. For a guy that could do everything he could on the footy field, do a somersault onto a high jump bag, not a chance in the world.
2 amazing mentions, Kane Munro and Jeremy Hum. This is what the nest is all about. A couple of real deep names.
I caught up with Jeremy Hum only a couple of months ago here in Perth. He lives in Boston, Massachusetts, and he sells what does he do? I can't remember, but he married an American girl and moved over there. So he's fairly well ensconced in Massachusetts and hates Donald Trump like everyone else.
Has he still got the curly blonde locks?
I'd say it's a tight curl. he's got a bit of a short hairdo at the moment, but he'll never lose the curls, old Hummy.
If we're deep diving into names like that around that 99, early 2000s era, if you're dropping Munro and Hum, I'm always rolling with David Haynes. That's a player that always comes to mind, Callum.
Yeah, no, well, he's probably, I suppose he ended up playing a bit and went and played some good footy at Geelong. I thought you were going to say David Antonovich there for a few.
We mentioned him as well, yeah.
Yeah, well, I had Tonner on my list as some of the more obscure things, or some of the sprays. He used to cop a few sprays from Judgy. Remember a couple of times Judgy was asking him, "What do you call that, Tonner?" That's got to be a whopper. That's one with a lot. But yeah, there's certainly some names go through there, and that's the thing I love about the footy clubs is, the amount of people that you get to meet over these, a few different clubs at a couple of different levels is fantastic. So, they're all characters too.
Anyone you didn't get on with, Callum? Are you happy to name?
Oh, no, not really. I mean, of course, like any big groups of people, there's guys that you probably prefer not to spend a lot of time with, but I don't think there's anyone that I'd go chucking a name out there just to cause some friction. But no, not really.
There is a question from a listener, Callum, for you. It's from Trev Clancy. He wants to know how different it was playing for a Victorian club like Carlton compared to the Eagles in terms of travel, weather, media, things like that.
Certainly the weather, using all those examples. I mean, the travel, I suppose, at West Coast in the couple of years where I was a regular in the team and had to get on the plane every second week, At that particular time, I didn't have a family, and I don't even think I had a partner at that point in time. So it didn't bother me too much, but I understood with guys that had families and things like that. I mean, particularly after games, if in that period of time we were losing a few over East as well. So you'd get on a plane, you'd be sore, you'd have the fitness guy telling you to get up every half an hour to have a stretch and walk up and down the plane, getting home at all hours of the morning and things like that. Not that you'd be complaining about having playing AFL footy, but it's certainly in comparison to driving your car from home into, Etihad Stadium to play a game of footy and you're home an hour after the game in your own bed, chalk and cheese from a travel point of view. I went from one of I think we all know West Coast are one of the richest clubs in the competition. And at the time, Carlton were on the, bare bones. So to see the difference in facilities in the club itself, I mean, West Coast probably had 200 employees and they've probably doubled that now. They probably had about 200 at the time. Carlton had the same guy that was washing jumpers was, doing the magnets on the board, and he was, it was just the size of the club and the facilities were just chalk and cheese. And it was funny having a conversation. I think it was with, if you remember, Andrew Carazzo, and I think he said something along the lines of, I was talking about something to do with the facility. And he said, well, that's what it's like. And I said, no. You need to go over there to Subi Oval and have a look at what's over there. And now, having just done the tour not long ago of our current facilities, it is just out of this world. The players that play for West Coast are so lucky. But mind you, I think most clubs are in that boat now too. So haven't been through Carlton's, but that was a big difference. And I suppose, my standing in the team at West Coast and my standing in the team at Carlton, I was only ever a fringe player really at both clubs in the end. At Carlton, no one has any idea who you are. In Perth, you could be playing waffle all year and people will still know who you are because it's always in the papers and things like that. So there was a bit of a difference. And certainly at the time, I think it'd be a very vastly different thing now that Carlton's, well run and got great facilities and they're on the up as far as a good young coach, a good young list. So I will say, because I have to get a plug in, there was a second part to that question about grand final packages.
There was. I was going to leave that for later, but he wants to know if you can do him a deal on the 2021 AFL Grand Final. You do work in sports travel, so please plug away.
Yeah, so our company, Travel and Sports Australia, we've been doing sports travel and obviously all other facets of travel as well for a while. But we do grand final packages, a little bit different this year with Brisbane, but like all travel agents around the country at the moment, we're hurting big time. No one's allowed to travel anywhere, and I don't like getting too political about things, but I feel like Mark McGowan over here might want to open the gates sometime soon for at least a little bit of travel, both from a mental health point of view for a lot of people around the country, but certainly from a selfish point of view from, our travel industry. There's a lot of people, closing doors and losing jobs and things like that. We're really lucky we've got owners of our business that have, prepared for a time like this. But yeah, so we're getting through it, and that's probably why I'm able to sit here talking to you with my T-shirt on and rather than being suited up and in the office right now. But look, we're fighting hard and we'll be back. So you can tell Trevor, hopefully he listens to this, that we'll be there for him in 2021. It'll be back, you would think, at the MCG, and we'll be right at the forefront selling packages. So, I'll give it a good plug. We sell packages to pretty much any sporting event around the world, and we do a bloody good job of it. So, Travel and Sports Australia, tassa.com.au. There's me plug over and done with.
Good work.
Well done, mate. Yeah, it's a tough time for everyone, and we want everyone who's struggling to come back bigger and better off the back of COVID, because there's so many good people struggling at the moment. So, yeah, we'll do our bit for Tassa for sure.
Yep.
Callum, thanks so much for joining us, mate. It's been great to have you on the Nest. So forthright and frank with your answers and so revealing. I've been really surprised in a pleasant way at just how revealing this interview has been all up, and not surprised though how in tune you are with the Eagles at the moment. And I think your passion for the club certainly permeates through, and fans will have enjoyed that. So, mate, thanks so much for joining us on the Nest. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, look, it's been wonderful. Really enjoyed the opportunity to chat to both of you boys, and look forward to listening well, not just listening back to this one, but, for future episodes as well, it'd be great.
Thanks, Callum. You just keep the Liverpool chat with Garby offline, please.
Well, you'd need another hour or two for that, but I'm a little bit annoyed over the weekend's results, but I'm sure Garby knows what I'm talking about.
Oh, I'm still fuming. I mean, what on earth the VAR was looking at in regards to Sadio Mane is beyond me. Need a telescope.
Boys, offline.
Need a telescope to find life on Mars to find out he was offside. That was absurd, and we've lost the best centre-back in the world.
He's clearly forgotten to clip his fingernails or something like that while he was in coronavirus quarantine or something. There was some very, very distraught moments in my house. I'll give you the tip.
Yeah, it was an angry night. But Sheffield United on the weekend, we're still the champions, Callum. Hopefully we can bounce back. Thanks so much for joining us on the Nest, mate.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Callum.
Callum Chambers, Drewy. Wow. I mean, for a guy who only played 54 games, just a fabulous guest to have on the Nest.
Yeah, he was superb. Yep, speaks well. Really interesting time in West Coast history, like that transition period. The honesty that he spoke with, we really appreciate. That's what we're all about, Garby.
Exactly. And I love a bloke who came from Victoria, still supports the Eagles passionately, hasn't gone back or anything like that, and chose to stay west. There's a few of them. Michael Braun's another one. Still calls Perth home. I guess it's different when you come from a country town, but it's great to see and so connected with the club.
Yeah, I love that he's just now he's just like us, basically. He's just a West Coast fan, but with, probably a little bit more skill to back up his insight.
Exactly right. So some more questions, Drewy. This one from Candace, which is, I think, a really good question. Just wanted to know our thoughts on a midfield coach. So Sam Mitchell did a great job, obviously, after retiring in the 2018 grand final season. Nathan Van Berlo's taken over that role, but he's now moved to Adelaide. So there probably is a chance there for a big-name senior assistant to come on board under Adam Simpson, and that could be a seriously big opportunity for the club to progress off the fields. What are your thoughts on who we might be looking at? Candace has mentioned Lenny Hayes, who has just left the Giants.
Yeah, and Lenny, I think, would be a good one. It's a hard time in terms of assistant coaches and coaching staff because of the soft cap cuts. There's probably not as much money in being an assistant coach as there used to be, and possibly smaller coaching staff numbers. So I like Hayes as an option. I guess the other thing would be, and I haven't landed on a name yet, but is there any retiring gun midfielders around the comp that maybe we could have a crack at? Because that is a potentially untapped area you can look into. So I'm sort of racking my brain at the moment to try and think of anyone who's given the game away.
Yeah, someone on Twitter mentioned Jordan Lewis, but I get the feeling he's very well entrenched there at Fox and is enjoying his work there at Fox and would probably want to roll with that for a little bit longer. But if he's looking at getting into coaching, maybe Simo would know him from his time at Hawthorn. Maybe he's someone who could be spoken to if he's keen at looking into that. But yeah, I'm not sure. There's no real name that comes to mind straight away now, but you saw the value of Sam Mitchell. Like, assistant coaches are really hard to get a gauge on. Like, coaches are never going to talk down an assistant. There's never been an assistant coach in the history of the game that has been criticised, probably in any sport, right? On the record. They're always the next best thing and doing a great job, and you can understand why. But with Mitchell, you knew there was something different. You just knew the way the players spoke about him, the coaching staff, that it wasn't the normal plaudits that you have to give to an assistant, that he was making a tangible difference to the team. If we can find someone like that again, that could certainly help things going into next season.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Would Matt Priddis step out of his, I think, is he working in finance or property or something like that? Maybe he'd be one they could think about.
Yeah. I wonder if there was a little bit of, bad blood's the wrong term, but I wonder if his departure from the Eagles wasn't necessarily the cleanest. Remember, he was pretty much dropped, and they said he was rested, but he wasn't. He was dropped, and then he retired straight after. So you just wonder if it wasn't necessarily the cleanest exit.
Yeah, that's a good point. Andrew Swallow, wonder if they could tempt the Swallow family back to WA. Perhaps he'd be someone to have a crack at. We're spitballing here. You know who I really think will be a good coach is Ed Curnow. Now, I don't believe he's got a contract next year, but I think it's likely that he will get one. But he'd be one to keep an eye on as a potential future assistant, solid person and been a great player as well.
And the other one, I guess, you make a good point that finances could be an issue, but we do have a lot of money. If there is some room in our soft cap, do we go for Michael Voss and bring him back? He was at the Eagles on big money, and then he got the job at Brisbane, so he left for good reason. Now he's at Port doing very well. But maybe he wants a bit of a change if he doesn't get a head coaching job next season. I think he'd be in the mix for the North Melbourne job, certainly in a big way. If he doesn't get that, maybe the Eagles say, listen, do you want to mix things up again and come back to the club where, you got things started but couldn't quite finish off the work? That could be an option.
I don't mind that one either. But it's going to be tough, with all the COVID restrictions the way they are and the soft cap producing. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Granny on Saturday, Drew. Who do you like before we get into some West Coast Eagles grand final moments?
I like Geelong.
Good.
I don't think I need to spell out the reasons why. I just don't like Richmond. So
yeah,
I like the Cats. I mean, you can go anywhere to get grand final analysis, but I'm rooting for Paddy Dangerfield. I
think it's a 50-50 kind of game. I hope the Cats win because I sort of picked them as my flag tip from about three quarters of the way through the season. So I'd like that to come to fruition, but I think it's going to be a really tight game. Can't wait for it. We've enjoyed some great grand final moments in the past, obviously. I mean, there's the obvious moments, of course, that come to mind in Grannies, but are there any others, Drewy, sort of left of centre grand final moments that the Eagles have been involved in that stick out for you?
Yeah, good question. Mark Nikoski's goal, start of 2005 grand final, was I really enjoyed that. Like Nico's celebration, like he's up and about. I loved that. I mean, our grand finals have just been so dramatic, so it's like it's, so easy to pick out those moments. But I think the last 30 or 40 seconds of the 2018 grand final, I just cannot put into words how amazing that was. Like, I was with my partner. I was in the sheed pocket, so the ball was just in front of us, and like realising that you were going to do it, like the roller coaster of that day, having been there in 2015 and going sort of through that, and then early in the game thinking that it was going to, mate, is this happening again? How is this happening? And then we had to ride it all day. It took us a long time to get, in front. And just jumping up and down that last 30 seconds, just knowing that we'd won it. Like, even, I'm almost tearing up thinking about it now. It was just, insane, amazing.
Yeah.
So grand final week for Perth people, I think, is different for everyone else. We experience it in a different way. And for most of our lives, like, grand finals is you go around for a barbecue in the beautiful sunshine at your mate's place. So, there's something special about that week, that's for sure.
Yeah, 2018 for me, obviously, just the moment at the end, just going nuts with, my best mate next to me, just screaming. I've got the video still because I took a video of the final siren, and we're literally just screaming for about 45 seconds non-stop, like 5-year-olds. It's incredible. And then, we went straight down to the boundary line like everyone else did, and we were lucky that Scotty Lysette, Elliot Yeo and Jack Darling stopped with the Premiership Cup right in front of us in our section. And I mean, you know what it's like, Drew. You work in the media and you cover sport for a while. You almost forget to be a fan sometimes. And that day, I got to go like full Nuffy fan mode and loved it. Just loved it so much. And for them to stop in front of us was awesome. And there was a photo in the Herald Sun the next day of me in the back with my mate and that crew of Eagles fans with those three players in front of us with the cup, which I'll probably get framed one day, that photo that was in the Herald Sun. So that was awesome. But 92 is the one that always sticks out. I've watched that granny about 400 times. And, the Sandy Roberts commentary of Matera set sail for home and then a pause as that ball's travelling goalpost high. And he goes, and the Eagles have hit the front. That moment, that commentary is just, I've had chills up my spine so many times watching that over and over again. That was the moment that, we hit the front and you thought, we are going to go on and win this now.
That is the iconic image of like the 92. And even, it's one of the iconic images of the club's history is Matera with the curly locks, like bouncing down the wing and just like 60 out running away from goal, like just insane. Yeah. We are so lucky to have these amazing grand final moments in our history. Like the 2005, 2006 grand finals, the way that all unfolded, the fact that we played Sydney so many times, all close games, like it's just incredible. But to have those moments, like Beau Waters taking that big mark late in that game, Chick, like Daniel Chick, handball and Shepherd, like unbelievable. Armstrong off the rookie list, the strap shoulder, kicking a goal from the boundary. There's just, every grand final has got those iconic stories and those great moments. So it's great to be able to celebrate them. And this is the week where we can really reminisce and think about it. And, that's why I'm excited for, a Paddy Dangerfield, but, every player, particularly from Geelong, who get the chance now that they can write their own fairy tale. Someone might step up and do something incredible.
Stevie Armstrong, that's the Shane Ellen moment. So Shane Ellen, unknown player, they throw him forward, he kicks 5 or 6. What did he kick in that granny in 97? Yeah. Stevie Armstrong didn't do much for the Eagles, much at all. But he's somehow playing in that game and bobs up with a crucial goal from the boundary. Like, that's the moment. No matter, he won't even think about another possession he had for the Eagles over his time at the club. He helped us win a flag. The Chick moment is just, whenever they throw up the best grand final moments of all time, it gets a mention, but it's an underrated mention. And I put my WA cape on and I always say, what about Chick, the smother, handball, Shepherd? I mean, the 3 1%ers in a row to put the Eagles in front when Hunter kicks that goal. I mean, it's an iconic moment. And, that's just one of the greatest you could watch over and over again as well.
You remember the last few minutes of the 06 grand final where the ball's just like bobbling around in the midfield. And a few times Daniel Kerr just picks the ball up and just runs. And he's just like bouncing it. Like he's running nowhere. He's probably got no one to kick to because all the Eagles players have like flooded up the ground, and he'll just run and just gain territory and just lock the ball back in and, reset, and we do our work around the stoppage. That was a titanic game. Like when Goods streamed out of the middle and kicked the goal in the last quarter, like I think every Eagles fan was like, crap. Like we're in all sorts here. The Brownlow medalist is just like he's about to take control of this game.
The more I watch that 06 granny, the more I get blown away by how good Daniel Kerr was. And he was stiff to not win the Norm Smith. Like Embley deserved it. Juddy has a ripper game as well. Kerr had a mind-blowingly good game. Like some of his runs in crucial moments were just superb. He was unreal. And Ashley Hansen's game does not get spoken about enough in 06, especially the start of the game. Like when the Eagles get going, he takes 4 or 5 crucial marks on the lead to give us control of the contest. And yes, Sydney came back into it, but without us getting the jump, we're not in the position to win it. So his game is hugely underrated in 06.
Do you remember when Juddy stole the ball off one of the Sydney defenders and socketed that ball through?
Or Feynman Buchanan, wasn't it?
Did you think we were going to win the grand final when that happened? Because I remember distinctly thinking, it's our day. Like this is ours when Juddy did that. And then when Kaz, the flapping sort of mullet duck bill at the back and the spinning finger, like I was like, we're on. Like we're going to win this by 10 goals.
I watched that Ben Cousins goal over and over because that was like the ultimate showman. A goal on the run and then, like the rock star, the finger wagging at the perfect moment when the crowd's going berserk because it's like the 4-goal lead. That just summed up Ben at his peak. Just, he knew how to just make the most of the situation to get a crowd going. I thought we'd win that game before the game, even if it was by a point. I don't know why. I just had this epiphany, like they won it last year. We've got this rivalry. It'd just be unjust if they won both. I don't know why. I just thought it's going to be close, but we will win it. I guess that's how it transpired, but it might have gone the other way.
What about Luke Ablett kicking the ball across his goal to Benny Cousins? The Ablett name has done so many good things in a grand final, and Luke does that. Like, was he tagging Cousins that day? Like, he'd probably done a great job. I thought, I was like, we're going to win when he did that and Cuz kicks that goal. Watching the last 5 or 10 minutes of that grand final is excruciating, the 05. I think Staker, he fumbled a ball like in front of goal and he could have kicked a goal for us, and then he gave away a 50 and there were a couple of moments late when the game was on the line. That is tough to watch, that 05 grand final.
Well, what about Elliot Yeo stepping in front of Alex Woodward, the runner, to put us in front in 2018? I mean, I remember just, this image of Yoey pumping the arms. I think every Eagles fan was doing the same thing. Just the biggest come on ever, because we finally hit the front after the horror start in that grand final where they're just dobbing them from everywhere and Tommy Cole's fumbling and they're doing what they did in the elimination final. Every single shot for goal, no matter from where, just sailed through.
Yeah. I mean, even like, remember Willie kicks the goal in 2018? It was like an accident.
Yeah, off the shins.
But
crucial.
But we were so, we were in all sorts, just to get on the board and get us going. And like Shuey's goal before halftime, that was massive. That was a great goal. Like the row from the tap and then the snap from the boundary. But if he hadn't kicked that, we still would have been, maybe 3 goals down or 2 goals down at half time.
Yeah.
That was huge.
Nathan Vardy's pack mark, start of the fourth.
2018 was, that was insane. Jeremy McGovern was in hospital. And he takes that mark, plays on. Even the kick to Vardy was insane.
Beast.
Not many players would take that kick, bite that off into the middle of the ground. Yeah, amazing.
So the 06 granny, another moment that comes to mind, the celebration. I was working for 6PR in Perth at the time, and I had to cover for the radio show that afternoon, the Sunday afternoon, the homecoming, Sunday afternoon, the homecoming. So we're in a separate media area, and the Eagles have all been put into this big super box, and they're about to be wheeled out onto the platform to be presented. And the crowd is just insane. I mean, it is the entire ground of Subiaco Oval without a square millimetre that is open, packed. And I remember Andrew Embley talking to David Wapunda, and I forgot to mention this to Embers when he was on. And I saw Andrew Embley, and I could lip read him through the glass saying, wow, look at this crowd for a game of football. He was just blown away by how many Eagles fans had come out to the celebration. It was mind-blowing, but I'll never forget that moment because it was just, an epic afternoon, a crowd that was just completely overwhelming, even for the players.
It's sometimes you forget how much footy means to everyone. And for us, it's that part of our job, I guess, you get sometimes separated from it, but how much it means, how important it is. Think about, there's going to be some fans of either Richmond or Geelong this weekend who have had the worst year of their life. And their team's going to win a grand final, and it's whether it's for the afternoon or for the week, it's going to make just life a bit more bearable, put a smile on their face. There's people who might have lost their jobs, they might have lost family members, their house, who knows. But they're going to be able to turn on the telly and watch their team, and hopefully puts a smile on their face. It's just so important.
Well, Eagles fans know more than anyone that it can sometimes cost a lot of money to support your team. You fly for a grand final and buy tickets and pay for a hotel. It costs a fortune. But if your team wins, you remember it forever. You do not think about how much money you spent, right? It does not even enter your mind. It's just that moment, and it's worth every single last cent that you spent. But, there's a lot to stump up sometimes to do it. It is so worth it. But if you're on the other side of the ledger, wow, it's pain.
Funny story about that. Before the 2018 prelim final against the D's, I mean, all the boys knew that we were going to go to the GF, but we hadn't got a ticket yet because obviously they're not on sale. So we said Eagles were paying $1.80 or $1.60 or whatever. So let's put whatever amount of money we need to put on this game, and when it returns and we win, that will pay for our ticket. So we all had our ticket was sort of paid for by the win. And after court, I mean, they Sportsbet might have paid out of quarter time. But,
potentially. Anyway.
Yeah. Anything else for me, Garby?
I think that'll just about do us, Drewy. Great episode of The Nest. Callum Chambers, superb. Nice to go through some grand final moments. Nice to have some listener questions as well. Hasn't been too much trade talk this week. Hopefully next week or in a couple of weeks when we're back on, there'll be a bit more to speak about in that regard, and perhaps some fresh faces linked with their club and some stuff for us to go over.
Absolutely. I think we may have some more sort of list news as well next week. So good luck to all the boys in their exit interviews, that's for sure.
Beautiful. Drewy, thanks so much. Thanks to everyone for listening to this episode of The Nest, and enjoy the grand final wherever you watch it from, and let's get Our hopes up that the Eagles are back in the big dance next year. Drury, thanks so much, mate.
Thanks, Garby.
This week at Safeway, shop the 10 for $10 produce sale. With the 10 for $10 produce sale, get items like large avocados, mangoes, green, red, orange, or yellow bell peppers, cucumbers, large lemons, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby peeled carrots for the member price of just $1 each. Plus, select meats like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef and Signature Select extra meaty pork loin back ribs are buy one, get one free this week. Hurry in before these deals are gone. Visit Safeway.com for more deals.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.